There we go. All right. Man, like you said, it's been so funny thinking about like all of this,
Yeah.
gearing up for this, because like it was kind of funny thinking about it because when your publicist for the band hit me up, and I was like, why does that band name sound so familiar? And I just like couldn't figure it out. And then it became a thing where I was like, oh, yes, I remember Nick posting this like a while ago in his Instagram stories and such. So I was like, there it is. Okay, cool. But it was kind of funny because I was really thinking about it. And it's like, I think after talking with Dan somewhat recently, I thought Que Sera was kind of getting back together. And then your announcement of The Dark was kind of the thing. And I was like, all right, so are you kind of doing like double duty, but you were also playing guitar for somebody else somewhat recently too? So are you just kind of like a hired gun now, like going out and about and doing gigs where you can get them?
No, I mean, for a spell, I did that a little bit since I moved out to Los Angeles. So I was playing for other artists and stuff. We had briefly talked about doing something, like getting the band back together or whatever, but I had the opportunity to play with The Dark, and I heard the songs and I was like, this rips. So I'm like, I'm all in. I'm like, I'm ready to go. Like, this is definitely my new passion project for sure.
Kind of interesting to hear the wider. I mean, it's always funny actually when you hear people that are like, oh, I can't believe you're playing this or you're into this or whatever. Like, I famously get pigeonholed into being like, you're a metal guy, and I'm like, I list all kinds of stuff. So it's like I know the artist you were going out with playing guitar was kind of more not, I want to say like pop punk, but kind of more like a poppy leaning sensibilities to it. Obviously, Que Sera was kind of like I don't know if you call it like a post-hardcore thing. It seems to be the phrase everyone likes. And The Dark is kind of like an electronic, heavy, genty kind of thing. So I feel like it's kind of hard to pigeonhole, what you are as an artist or what you're into. So this seems to be one of the first kind of this heavy style of music you've really ventured into. So how is it kind of getting to play like breakdowns with like triplets and all these kind of like tight grooves and stuff like that, especially as the bass player?
Yeah, man. I mean, I've always had a passion for this kind of music. Like, this is the heavier stuff is what I grew up in, what got me into playing live music in general. So I've always had this aspect, and I was playing for like poppier artists with like a little edge to them and whatever. That's what I like. You gotta have a little attitude, but I always just end up gravitating back towards this stuff, man. Like the live shows, the energy of the performance, and the energy of writing this stuff. There's really just nothing like it. Like, I do have such a love for like more mellow stuff, more like beautiful chord progressions and all that stuff. But I mean, at the end of the day, like when I'm playing a gig, I always want it to go one place, and that is always with just a kick and breakdown, or I could just do my thing and have fun on stage and watch people like spin kick and stuff. So
I kind of want to do something a little different. I haven't really gotten to do with anyone because our history together, I'm going to kind of back it up just a little bit, and I'll preface a lot of this probably in the intro before this chat. But, you're kind of one of the very few, other than Andrew from Idola at this point, I think, who has been on that was a part of my life when I was booking shows and doing that thing. Like, that's such a thing I don't do anymore and feels like a lifetime ago at this point of just dealing with that. So, I just kind of had mentioned you were in the band Que Sera and have done some other stuff, but like, let's kind of back up a little bit more and kind of get to know more about you and your journey through music. So, when did you first start playing music, and what was sort of the catalyst for you to get into it, just as a fan, and then wanting to make your own?
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of weird. I think it all honestly stems from boredom. I mean, I picked up the guitar. I picked up the guitar in I think I was in like 7th grade or something. And when I had played all my video games, I was like, I needed something to do. So I picked up the guitar, and I mean, I just like kind of fell in love. And, my journey, I think I got into like emo and rock, like pretty early on. So I was always into like more niche kind of subcultures of music and expression and all that. So I got into emo and then kind of like got into more metal stuff. And then ever since then I started like playing in bands in high school, and I've just always, just gravitated more towards, creating and writing. And so it's really it's just been kind of something I've always done. There's no real point I can, pinpoint to being like, this was my moment of inspiration. I saw this band and I had to do that. I just always kind of gravitated toward it. Like when I pick up an instrument, I'm like, I just want to like make something cool. And it always just kind of like expresses itself however it does.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like it's interesting because I know I'm older than you guys, and I forget by how much. I think it's at least by almost a decade. But it still is a thing where I think you're still old enough to kind of have been around when like music videos were still a big thing, and like you would see a band, you know, whatever band it may be, and you're like, oh, this dude's doing, you know, I can still remember watching like a Chae on the first record, and they were doing Lip Gloss in Black, and there's the scene slow mode where everyone's spin kicking, and I think Dan's doing like the spin kick with the guitar and shit. And I remember just seeing that, I was like, I want to do shit like that, like where it's, I don't know if people have those same tendencies to be inspired by what they're visually seeing on like an MTV, which doesn't exist like that anymore, and things like that. So to kind of find inspiration almost out of boredom of just like, I don't know. It's interesting that that's what led you to it versus like being drawn to it from, as I would have assumed, being from a small East Coast state as well. I think Rhode Island's smaller than Delaware somehow, but not by much. But it's a thing where it's like music was kind of one of those things for me as a kid growing up where it's like it made me feel like there was something beyond just this small little area, which, you know, again, growing up in Delaware, it's like there really wasn't anything. There really wasn't a scene. There wasn't places to play, to go see shows or anything like that. And so I'm kind of projecting onto you that I feel that it would be very similar growing up for you, where it's like there's not really probably much of a local scene initially that made you feel like this was an outlet for you. Yeah. Am I correct with that, or?
Close. I mean, when I started taking music seriously, and you know, like starting bands with the specific intention of growing them, and like, what can I do better, and being able to critique yourself, and you know, just having a more like business minded aspect. I will say, like Rhode Island, I was lucky because Rhode Island did have a very active, like hardcore metal scene, more so than other places that I've been to in the country in terms of like what the kids are into, at least at the time I was coming up. So I would go to these shows with my friends, and I saw Paramore at like a 100-cap venue. You would see these bands. I remember there's a legendary venue called the Living Room in Rhode Island, and every band, I mean, Circus Survive, every band in that like kind of genre that molded my taste, so to speak, like they all came through there, and the shows were ripping. So more when I was like, oh, I think I want to like not so much be an artist and write and create, but when I was like, I think I want to like be in a band and do this, it was definitely going to those shows and seeing like seeing these crowds just go absolutely bananas, like crowd surfing and head walking, like from the first note of the first song. I was like, I actually think this would be sick to do that. But I know exactly what you mean with the culture of like music videos and watching, because as I did develop in my career and kind of turn the lens in on myself, and like, how can I grow my band? What are things other bands are doing? And like, you get exposed to these like awesome visuals. And I remember Under Oath was a super big catalyst for me. I always thought their videos were so unique and their sound was so unique, and having the aesthetic that they do and the aesthetic that they kind of like portrayed their unique music with, I always thought was super inspiring, and definitely kind of leaned into that, you know.
So kind of it's kind of interesting because I feel like at times, you know, I talk about different scenes kind of popping up and certain ones kind of missing me just due to the age and demographics like not being for me. But I feel like it gets kind of interesting because like when you think of like a band like Under Oath, or I'll kind of say like the early 2000s emo screamo type stuff, or post-hardcore or whatever tag you want to throw on it. I feel like it sort of is akin to growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s with nu metal, where it's like there was a tag thrown on a genre, but when you really kind of step back and look at the genre as a whole, it was almost genreless because it incorporated so many different styles. Like, you know, you could say Under Oath does not sound like Paramore, but Paramore doesn't sound like Jimmy Eat World, doesn't sound like Taking Back Sunday. Like, but there's something that kind of inherently sounds, I think it's just the time that it came out. But it's interesting to kind of think about how those things shape us and how it's kind of weird to then want to emulate these things where it's like, well, what part are you emulating? What part are you taking from this grab bag of influences and so forth? So I always kind of like to pick people's brains and go like, when you're listening to it, when an Under Oath or whatever, what are you taking from it? It almost sounds like it's the permission to kind of choose to go down whatever path that you want to, as long as it feels right artistically.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly what I love so much about the dark and doing this stuff now is, you know, it's the idea is pretty clear, you know, in terms of genre and what the songs are, and I really like the clarity of that. but it also, you know, it just pulls from so many different places in that world, and things that have inspired me. I mean, Nine Inch Nails and all that stuff. Like it's just a really, really cool project to, you know, really kind of express all of that stuff that, you know, really cultivated my taste. Um, and yeah, man, I'm excited, bro. Like it's even the new stuff we've been writing, and everything moving forward. Like I feel like it's a testament to that old school kind of mentality in that world, where I feel like for a while bands were, you know, this works, this doesn't, cookie cutter, send out the songs, whatever. And I feel like this is a really honest like representation of that kind of alternative scene and music that, you know, you and I kind of grew up with these bands where you go, you know, Paramore doesn't necessarily sound like Circus Survive, or, you know, Under Oath doesn't sound like, you know, and I feel like we're getting closer to making like a sound for a band. You go, oh, this band sounds like this. And, you know, it can be like peripheral to other artists that are out there, but it's very, you know, I think it's important to have your direction, and with your direction, like sonically comes your direction artistically and visually. And I've always loved, you know, bands with that full spectrum of content, where, you know, I love the album, I love the songs, but, you know, you see the album artwork and you're like, oh, this connects with me, this connects with what I'm listening to, and just have it, or the videos, you're like, oh, this is like exactly what they would do. Like, it's just so cool, unique. Like, that's what I'm really like. What excites me with bands and music lately, you know, seeing the full kind of spectrum of integrated on all ends, you know?
So I don't want to presume that you've ever heard an episode of this podcast, because I just was talking to a friend of mine who actually sent me a bunch of these NA beers as I'm finishing up Dry January. And they're like, oh, I'm excited to check out your show. And I'm like, yeah, you know, just 8 years. Been doing it 8 years. Like, you know, welcome to the show. But it's a thing where, you know, a lot of times what I like to do too is to kind of go back and kind of learn more about the human experience that everyone goes through their own way. So I kind of want to pick your brain about something that I've not really gotten to ask anyone from your old band.
Mhm.
You know, something I find really interesting about what you guys had done was, you know, you started breaking away. Like, you were touring, you were getting on some decent, smaller, mid-size, you know, 400 cap room kind of type tours, kind of making a name for yourself. And then it just kind of went away. Like, so something that I always like asking, especially when you're at an age where starting something new, when you have like a decent amount of life lived and behind you, is the idea of starting over. And what does that look like for you? And how do you navigate now starting a new journey where you're not Nick Sera, you're just Nick? Like,
Yeah.
kind of balancing and figuring out who you are at such an integral part of your actual young adult life. So how was that process for you to kind of go through?
Yeah, it definitely, I would say I kind of like just relinquished control, and I would, you know, I felt like with Chae a lot of times I was swimming upstream, and, you know, trying
Why
to make,
so?
you know, opportunities would present themselves, and then like kind of like be brutally ripped away. And like, I would have to I felt like every step forward was like, I had to claw for it, I had to grab for it. And I was like, it was definitely a mental test, and it was a constant challenge, and constantly putting out fires, and, you know, which again, I don't want to sound ungrateful or anything. Like, it was a labor of love for sure. I did like, I love the challenge of it all, you know? But I did kind of resolve myself to like leaving that world. And I was playing for pop artists, and it was fun, and it was, you know, easy, and it felt like everything just kind of happened. And then when I was presented with this opportunity, everything just happened so organically. And it just like, you know, I just kind of opened myself up to the opportunity, but I was not planning to, you know, do this kind of stuff again. Like, I had kind of, it's like you said, like starting over it's so daunting, and to know how much effort and how much time and how much care you put into something after, you know, 5, 6, 7 years, to be like, all right, let's start at the beginning again. Let's do, like, you know, it's ahead of you. So it's a lot more daunting. But, you know, I just kind of wanted to be more in touch with what I was feeling, and more in touch with like the opportunities that were being presented. And, you know, with a lot of the times with Chae Sera, you know, you try so hard and you scrape so hard, and it's amazing to like see your baby grow. You know, you see it, you see the fruits of your labor. But, you know, it's you kind of lose the at least my experience was, I kind of lost perspective of, you know, every time you get something, you're always thinking about the next thing, so you don't really appreciate the fact that you accomplished something, and it really kind of takes the joy out of it. And now my philosophy as an artist, and I just want to be grateful for everything that's happening right now. And if you zoom out, it's me starting over at the beginning, but I can't think about it that way, or else I want to enjoy the ride, So I'm like, this is just cool. It's really amazing musicians and artists that I'm working with. The rest of the guys in the dark, like, they're just so talented, and it's such good people to be around. So technically, it's starting a band over, and it's rebranding myself as this person, like, in this world of, like punk, hardcore, and alternative music, but it just feels good. So I'm like, I'm just going to go with it, man. It feels good to be around the people, and it feels good to write and play the songs. And so it can be daunting for starting a new chapter, but it's also really exciting. So I think the perspective of just kind of honing in on the fun aspects and the great aspects really makes it worthwhile for me than, looking at it from the other perspective, the other side.
Well, kind of interesting about that time frame of kind of the dissolution of the band. All of you kind of separately started some other projects and so forth, and it was kind of interesting to see that you seemingly, this is going to be such a weird way to say this, but you seemingly were the one to kind of realize social media can influence your brand. Like, I felt like you were the first to kind of be like, here's me writing an idea, here's me jamming along, here's me doing something. And I felt like and I feel like maybe that's what attributed to your success in being able to find other gigs, where maybe the other ones, through multitude of different reasons, some people have kids, some people have jobs, families, all that kind of stuff. But it seemed like you were the one kind of right out the gate that was ready to kind of go, okay, this is what it looks like now. I'm post this band. I have to think about me and my career. What does that look like now? I guess it looks like making these little reels and so forth. And you were kind of the first to really do that. So to me, when seeing you start kind of becoming a hired gun of sorts and playing with different people, it's like, well, that felt like a natural progression. How what is the word I'm looking for? How intentful was, that's not even a word. How mindful were you of kind of how you wanted to kind of step into this new facet of you exploring music on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I always knew that I wanted to, play music. And even after Sera broke up and all that stuff, I knew that, it wasn't the end for me, but I wasn't really sure what my path forward looked like. Big inspiration for me, my buddy Derek, of course. He's the drummer in the dark. He has been doing that stuff. He is always, playing and like creating a brand and thinking about, how his art comes off to other people with his own stuff. So I just kind of fell into like, well, I'm not in a band anymore. I know how to do that. I know how to be in a band, but now I don't have that anymore. So what does that look like? And, I kind of fell on his format of how he was doing things. And it did. I mean, it definitely, it paid off. I got other artists to notice me, and it got me to, connect with other people who are actively creating and actively trying to, build a life for themselves with music and all that stuff. So in this industry, you meet a lot of people that are in it for the love of the game and the art and all that stuff, and which I totally am. But, there is a level of, sacrifice and committing to, growing it to something beyond just something that you love to do. And when you meet those people, for me, that's what energizes me. And I try to keep those people around. So just emulating what I was seeing from those people that were inspiring me to, like, all right, you can play and you love music and you can do this, but what does the next step look like? How do you go forward? And that answer isn't always so clear. So I always just look to others for inspiration to kind of like influence me in my own decision making. And that's kind of what, why I started to just like throw stuff out there. I'm like, all right, I'll play to a song. All right, I'll show you something I'm writing or something I'm working on, show you inside what I had been doing in my old band the whole time. But now with the current, like, social media, like, landscape, like, it's a way to connect with people other than having them buy your CD and listen to your song when you don't have a band to sell, to make a CD and sell, so right. You know what I mean?
Well, I just think it gets kind of interesting because, like, another thing that I enjoy discussing on here is sort of just the ins and outs of like how people find a way. And it's something I talk quite a bit about is pivot points. Like, kind of going back to booking shows, it's like, I talked about how I knew I always wanted to do something in music, even growing up. I just didn't know what. And then, I took my love of music, took my fascination of watching, band documentaries and making of records and stuff, because I found that process to be really interesting. And it's like, then I booked shows because I was like, all right, being in a band didn't really work for me. So I'll book shows so I can have people stop being like, there's no good bands. No, I'll curate a night for you. Come hang out. But then I got tired of like local egos and stuff like that. And like just the bullshit of dealing with venues and behind the scenes stuff. So then writing about it, but then there comes weird shit with that. And then it was like, I started doing this because I just kept pivoting where it's like, how can I still kind of do something in this landscape while still being true to who I am and what I've been doing, but find something that just works for me. And anyone who knows me and has spends like 5 minutes with me knows I love to talk. So it's like, all right, like this is it. But I understand that like, that's not necessarily everyone's through line. Is just like, it's a point A to point B to point C and down the line. Some people, it just starts from A and then you're at Q and then you're like, all right, I don't know how I got here, but here I am. And just like I said, kind of the mindfulness of trying to figure that out. And like I said, it's in the day and age now of social media being what it is. Like, I mean, I can't tell you how many bands nowadays, like, don't even live in the same states. Famously, like a Chae now, like half of the dudes don't even live. Porter lives in another country. Brandon just moved to Tennessee. Like, half the band's not even around each other anymore. And they don't have to be, because you can file share, you can write songs a different way. So the internet has made us more connected to where we can actually be separated more than we ever had to be. So the idea of being in a band, are you living out in LA now? I don't know that.
Yeah, no, I've been in LA for 3 years. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. Because I was going to say, I feel like that's such a giant move for you for opportunities, but that's still got to be scary to commit and kind of be like, all right, like I believe in myself. Is this really what I'm doing? Do I really need to give up like what I've known my whole life to move out to LA to pursue the dream and the passion and all that? Or can I achieve it here?
Yeah. I mean, it was scary, but I always say like, it's not scarier than anything else I've done in music. Like to go on a tour and sleep in a Walmart parking lot in a van. Dude, I've done a lot of scary shit, like to like pursue what I want to do. So yeah, like uprooting your life and going somewhere new and making new friends and a new, the whole thing, and making new like business connections and all that stuff. It's daunting, but it's, it's what I've been doing my whole life. I've been always trying to grow some kind of band or do something like with my art. So famously, you're a musician and people always say, oh, well, make sure you have a backup plan. What's your backup plan? And I've never had one. So it's always been really scary. So like, yeah, it's just another scary, crazy thing I'm doing with no safety net, but I've always found a way. I kind of just trusted in myself and my capabilities to like figure it out, it is scary. It's daunting, but again, not scarier than anything else I've done up to this point,
I assume you made the drive, or did you fly out to?
Oh, I drove.
I've not made a full drive like that, that far, but I've done plenty of road trips over my years. And I always feel like there's kind of a moment as you get older and you're kind of aware of these thoughts that you're having where you're like, oh my God, there's, this moment, like, for an example, like I remember driving to Atlanta with a friend of mine from Lansing, and I was driving into downtown Atlanta at like probably 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and the sun's just starting to come up just as I'm coming through, like to get right into downtown Atlanta. And Atlanta, like, since I've been going there, it's like my favorite city. If I ever want to move somewhere, I always say like, that's the place I want to move. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the first times, other than here in Grand Rapids, doing the same thing, coming around, our downtown area, where I was like, fuck, man, this feels like home. Like there's something about this sunset. It feels like mine. It feels like this is where I'm supposed to be. And you just kind of have these like life epiphanies sometimes, like being on the road like that. Obviously touring, I'm sure you have a lot more of those than just being by yourself, kind of driving through the country to go on this new adventure. But was there a moment on your journey from east to west where you had something that was just like a profound moment of like, wow, and you'll never forget that part of the drive?
For me, it was Nashville. Nashville was my spot, man. Like, I didn't think I would like it as much as I would, you know. I've never been like a country guy. I know it's like a stereotype, but there's a lot more music there than just country. But I had the caricature of the city, and then, you know, every time I was there, and I'm like, this is where I'm at. But also, surprisingly, LA as well. I really love it here too. Like, I don't know what that says about me, but I really
you like very populated cities, apparently.
Yeah, dude, populated. You know, but what's important for me is, and one thing that I love about moving here that I felt like I was lacking back home in Rhode Island was everyone here is a creative, and they're all chasing their dreams, and it's inspiring for me. You know, everyone's an actor or a dancer or a producer or a rapper or something, and that comes with its challenges in terms of connecting with people and making friends, because obviously these people are, you know, they're chasing their dreams, and they have to do whatever it takes to make sure that they're okay in their journey. So sometimes, you know, you can be collateral damage for that, but in general, it's inspiring for me to be around people that are from the same mindset as me. You know, like, I'm from a very small place. You know, I took a band like pretty far with you know what everything was set up for me in that place, and a lot of other people, you know, they're inspired and they want to do it, but there's always, you need those people around you that encourage you and say, yeah, it's really dangerous to sleep in a Walmart parking lot, but it's cool. You're playing shows, you're touring, like, go do that. And that's what I love about LA and Nashville, with another place with like tons of musicians and stuff, is people aren't afraid to say, yeah, this is a dumb idea, but it's rock and roll. It's rock and roll. You should definitely do that.
I think what gets interesting, the sort of the duality of me still like holding on to my East Coast roots, even though I've lived here in the Midwest exponentially longer than I ever lived out there. But it's inherently, it's just still in me. And like talking, like I have a friend that lives out here from Philly now, and you know, we talk about shit back home, and people are always just like, what the fuck are you guys talking? Like, you know, like, what's tailored ham? What's a Wawa? What are you guys talking about? Just like weird stuff like that. And we're like, oh, if you only knew, like, it's a thing from back home. But I think like the other thing that as I get older, I kind of find interesting is sort of the culture shock of living in different places, or at least dealing with different places. And so far, like the one experience I have of going out west to LA specifically, I just felt like it's like, I guess the hurry up mentality I have from being from an East Coast, where you're like, let's fucking go, man. Like, time is money. Let's go. We got to hustle. And it's like that city as a whole just doesn't wake up until like noon. And you're like, we are wasting time. We are wasting fucking time out here.
I've already had 2 panic attacks.
So to me, it's one of those where it's like, I don't think my personality is chill enough to kind of exist in a space like that. But I feel like I kind of love picking people's brains and being like, what was kind of a culture shock moment for you, if there even was one, of just from being from somewhere so long, like the East Coast, to, you know, essentially one of the biggest, like you said, it's where everyone goes to chase their dreams.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, man. It was a big culture shock at first. And it's exactly what you said. East Coast mentality. It's, you know, it's very just go, 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 go. And people here are so laid back that I had to realize that I was coming off aggressive to people when I was, I'm like, this is just how I talk. Like, this is just how I am. I'm like, no, I'm fine. We're cool. I think you're cool. Like, no, I thought we were vibing. But
yeah.
Some people are like, oh, it's like everything okay? You just seem like kind of like intense. So I had to I did have to kind of reevaluate how I come off to people. I think it's been for the best. I do feel like when I go home now, I do like when I go home to the East Coast, I can see it from a way that I never saw it before. And I'm like, I feel at home and I love it, but I could kind of see like how people would say that. But it's funny though. It is really just it is such a culture difference. Like even a lot, obviously everyone out here, you know, a lot of people are transplants. So it's like, you're from all over. So you meet someone and the people I click with instantly, there's no weirdness or whatever. I'm like, where are you from? And they're always like New York, Boston. That's always East Coast. There's just something about it that, you know, we just kind of speak the same language. And it's like a language, it's a dialect that only we get, you know?
Well, I think like what gets kind of interesting about it, and I've said it ad nauseum on this show, is, you know, in my travels with Bridget over the years of like, you know, we're getting ready to go to Nashville like next week. You know, we go out west, we go to the south, we go back east, you know, sometimes, a lot of times when I have to go home for funerals and stuff. But it's a thing where, to me, it just like I think like for me, like the East Coast still like is it's where like people like we're just genuinely upfront and honest. Like kind of what you see is what you get. We're a little thick skinned, but like we will poke fun at you, but it's all love. Like that's how we love you, is like if we're ripping on you over
Yes.
but it's a thing where it just gets kind of interesting to see how different it creates these like landscapes of things. Like I think for me, when I moved from out east to here in the Midwest, like in 95, and it's like the biggest thing that was crazy to me was just seeing how long it took the Midwest to catch up to things. So it's like, not saying Delaware's a hotbed for anything, especially back then, but it's like we're an hour away from Philly. We're not too far away from, people having friends and family in New York or some of these bigger states and bringing their culture into us. But when I moved here, it's like culture was behind from what I had experienced. And I don't think that that's necessarily the same anymore, because the internet has allowed everyone to kind of have a level playing field. But I still do feel like there is that little bit of geographical like things that just are inherently them. And like I think the idea like of a transplant city sounds really great in principle, but I always come back to like my experiences of being in Portland, Oregon, and Austin, Texas, and it just feels like the thing that made those cities what they were at a time. There's too many transplants now that are holding on to what they think it is.
Yeah,
and it hasn't become what it's supposed to be yet, because there just aren't enough roots being put down currently. It's going to take time for all that to blossom and grow. And so I feel like it gets kind of interesting where it's like all the East Coast people transport over to the West Coast. And I'm like, at what point is LA just going to turn into like New York light?
Yeah, there's a lot more Dunkin' Donuts here now, I will say.
Everything runs on Dunkin' now.
Yeah. Yeah, man. But
that's such a weird thing too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I also think it's cool too to kind of like, see what people are doing, and it's all the art that gets made, all the songs and everything. Like it's all a snapshot of the time that you're in. So yeah, there's always a lot of transplants, and even the East Coast now, it's like, it's not, when I visit home, it's not the same as it was, but to them, they're like 10 years from now, they're going to be saying like, oh, this is not the same as all these transplants here. So it's always just like a snapshot of what's going on. And that's why I really do love to, with touring and being able to see all these different cities, and you see what the local artists and what everyone's making, like in terms of like bands and stuff. I'm always like kind of like paying attention to who's from where and what kind of things are popping off where. It's just always really interesting to see these bands coming from these certain places. And it's just fun to think about what kind of influences that. And it's fun to think like, damn, that scene. I'm like, I know that scene is fire. When you see like a particular band come out with a particular sound, you're like, oh, I know shows there probably rip. Like, so it's just cool to kind of like, and that's the cool thing about the internet too, man. Like I know a lot of people have feel kind of some kind of way about internet culture and all that stuff. And of course it has its issues, but I really personally, I love how connected everything is, and how you can make an album in your bedroom and just put it out there and it can take off. There's no gatekeepers anymore. There's just, people just creating what they like, what they listen to, and showcasing their taste. And it can go right to other people that think the same way. And I think it's really cool and really organic. Of course it has its issues, but I have a more positive kind of outlook on the kind of modern landscape of like internet stuff and how it relates to art and music.
So kind of talking more about, the reason why you're here, some questions I have about the Dark. How long has this project been incubating at this point?
So the initial idea started with Craig and Alan, and they've been cooking on it for a while. It's been a couple of years, and they really, went over everything with a fine-tooth comb. It's their baby. They think about everything. Like they really pour a lot of love and attention into it. So it's been cooking for a long time. I've been in the band since we officially released. I've been a member. But their brainchild and like the spirit of what the project is, really, I got to give credit to those guys. They're really incredible artists.
I was gonna say, because it feels like kind of straight out the gate, everything feels like has intent. Like it was meant to be this way. The visuals of everything, from the videos to how the Instagram stuff looks, like everything feels like it was like we knew this is how we wanted this to be, versus like I feel like some people do, where they're like, well, I'm really excited about this, let's just get it out, we'll figure everything else out after the fact. That it's like, I feel like it's got to be good to kind of be a part of something that is that mindful of like, okay, where do we want this? Where do we probably, I bet there's probably even a 5-year goal where you're like, all right, in 5 years, here's what we want to be doing.
Yeah, exactly, man. And that's what drew me to the project. You know, I kind of resolved myself to, you know, I'm just gonna like play for pop artists and like low stress, you know, safe, like easy songs to play, just have fun and play gigs and stuff. And then when I was exposed to this, I was like, oh, this is why I started doing music. Like, you know, the songs are killer. I love the songs, I love the direction, but everything around it, just like I could just see how much love and how much passion was put in. And I know how that affected me as a listener. And I was like, I want to share. I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of sharing that with other people. Because it brought me back immediately to what got me into music and playing shows. And like, I do feel like it kind of tapped into that vein of just an organic idea of a band with no ulterior motives, no anything. Just like, these songs are awesome. This is how they look. I can see it in my mind. Like, just really like pouring love and thought and intent into it. And yeah, it just really excited me. And I was like, I have to do this. This is like, I can't pass this one up.
I was kind of surprised when remembering when you had posted initially, I think the clip of, God, I'm terrible with song titles. The one where you're basically in mostly like a red room, kind of like the dark room, but it's like red light. I remember that part.
Oh yeah, Chemicals was the first. It was the first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you guys had put out the teaser for that, I remember kind of being surprised that you weren't playing guitar, and especially given the fact that now it's like, I feel like people are a lot more easier with being like, oh, 2 guitars, no bass, bass is on tracks. Like, that's fine. So like, I was kind of surprised to see that like the band, even in sound, is kind of going for a more traditional band approach of like guitar, bass, like whatever, instead of kind of doing like feel like you kind of see with some of these like bands. I'm probably going to say this, and I think I am immediately going to be like, no, they have a member for each instrument as well. But as I say, I feel like Dayseeker at different times has had like 2 guitar players and not a bass player, or things like that. You'll see that becoming more of a thing, I feel like, in this style of music now, where it's like people are just like, having it on a track's not a big deal.
Correct. Yeah, and you know, I would never fault anybody for doing that. I'm a firm believer in utilizing the technology that's out. If you can put on a sick show and, you know, have just track your bass or whatever, at the end of the day, you know, musicians, if you're playing live, at the end of the day, your main thing is you're an entertainer. So go out there, put on a sick show, create a space for people to have a good time, and you know, you're in creating a culture for these people to come to. So I will say, I did think it was really cool that they were insisting on having a full band, because they had been, I mean, like I said, they had been cooking it up for a long time. So they could have very easily just, we're a duo, we do this, you know, like the regular 2024, 2025 like mold, you know?
Yeah.
And been fine, you know. I think the quality of the songs really would, like, I think it stands up to that. But it was really cool to, you know, and very intentional that they were like, no, we're a band, like we want to do a band. And again, that's what like tapped into me. I'm like, this is organic. This represents why a lot of us do what we do. And to me, I do feel that's important in a world where a lot of the bands and a lot of the artists, you know, they're writing and they want their stuff out there, but it's not, you know, that real, doesn't have that like garage band feel where it's like guys getting together and writing songs, you know. When again, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just for me what touches me, and I know there's other people out there like that. So I want to make sure that stuff is out there and available, and it isn't like a dying art, you know.
Well, like, it was kind of interesting listening to the EP because I got it sent to me a couple of days ago. One of the weirder like influences, and I know this isn't you playing these parts, at least currently in this on this record, but I kind of felt like a little bit of I think his name's Chris from Muse, the bass player from Muse. Like the textures and the sonics that like that dude taps into, and like I became exponentially more aware of them seeing them live recently, where you're like, Yeah, okay, duh, no shit. Like a trio, essentially, with an extra, like an ancillary musician for whatever they need him for, like kind of backstage. But it's a thing where when you watch that dude play and you realize how much he's kind of holding a lot of the foundation of every fucking song down, I was
Yeah.
like, I feel like that's going to be you in
Yeah,
this band. And as I was kind of thinking about that, because, you know, as we've kind of already said, like guitar was your first thing.
Mhm.
How do you find your way into kind of maybe looking at playing bass differently than guitar, aside from just, you know, tonal nuances and so such like that? But like, do you tap into like, okay, now I'm thinking of some of my favorite bass players and like, what do they do and how do they do it? How can I try to bring that to this? Like, are you kind of finding yourself in a new instrument at this point?
Absolutely. Especially, I mean, I have the capability of playing bass. I've always been able to do it, but specifically a band like this and with drop tunings, it's been fun, man. It's like learning a new instrument, but without all the hard parts. Like my fingers are already calloused. Like I already know the scales, like all this stuff that sucks, I'm already done with. Now it's just all the fun parts. So I get to learn about new gear. I get to learn about how to make these tones. I get to learn about, you know, how if I play something a certain way, it's going to sound live versus in the studio. Like, and I'd love to nerd out about that stuff. So it's been a lot of fun for me. And with a band that's, you know, the idea is like is clear, but there's a lot of experimental elements. So it's just really liberating to kind of like be able to approach things from a different way and pull inspiration from a ton of different sources and stuff, and not just being like, hey, you know, we're a metal band, you know, put your fuzz on, make sure you're thumping and you're fine. It's been cool to kind of like be able to like, oh, this would be cool here, this would be cool here, and especially with like the electronic element too. It's been a lot of fun, man. I've been loving it.
Already, I mean, I know you have a show coming up in about a month, just like 3 weeks as of when we're recording. Is that going to be your first actual live show?
No, so we did a short run with Red Jumpsuit Apparatus.
Okay.
So we've been playing the shows. We got the set down. It's killer. It's the show's on February 23rd. If you're in LA, come fucking hang. But it's a lot of fun. The songs sound great live. So yeah, I already kind of like broke the ice with it. I was a little nervous my first time. I was like, oh, this is a new world for me, but it all rips, man. It's all the same.
Well, I was going to say, I could see this being a thing where sort of looking at like, you know, God, like almost any band now, like a BT band or something like that, where it's like, you're not just the bass player. You got to play keys. You got to play synths. You got to do backing vocals. You got to do, maybe there's like one drum and you kind of help drum something. Like, you know, a lot of bands now are kind of fleshing out the live sound by having to be a multi-instrumentalist themselves. So I was going to say, how has that even been to try to figure out what you can replicate live, what's going on tracks, who's doing what? Because I see this being a really immersive thing for the whole band to kind of pull off all of this.
Yeah. Right now we do lean on the tracks. You know, we're trying to, like, as we're getting our footing and kind of figuring out what our live show looks like, what the live experience is like. We really want to lean into the performance aspect and stage presence and all that stuff. So we lean on the tracks for most of it. Every kind of tone difference with like the organic instrument, not the keys or anything, is all pedals and things like that. So it's all done like analog. But yeah, one day I would love to like kind of start experimenting with actual different live tones and doing different synths and things like that. So you kind of just like enhance watching a band play, you know, but right now, like, you're just going to watch me whip my bass around and stuff. So it's still have fun, but
yeah, I wasn't sure if we were going to expect like some Nine Inch Nails type shit where it's like all of a sudden it's like bass kind of goes to the wayside. You're playing a synth part. And then eventually it's like, okay, now the bass kind of comes back. But I don't know. To me, like, this band seems like one where it's like, I, as an outsider, just kind of looking at it, would be like, man, I see like LED wall stuff. I see like so many visual components to this that would be a lot of fun that I'd almost be like, I guess fuck me. Like, just watch this shit. This shit's cool. Like, I don't even need to be here on the stage. So like, it just gets kind of interesting to kind of think about how this translates live. But I even think like, you know, at this point, if you're working with the guys, and I don't want to like infer, but it's like, I think it would be kind of interesting. And I almost could see this sort of being like what the guys in like Emery do, where it's like, oh, Nick came up with this guitar part. We're switching, like, I play bass now, he plays guitar for this one song. And it just kind of is whoever's best suited to play the song. And I feel like that would be interesting too. Cause like, not a whole lot of bands are necessarily doing that either, where it's just like you're defined to your one role, you do this, I do this, and that's just how we play. But like I said, hearing this band, it's like there's so many things that I'm like, oh man, like I hear a little bit of Muse, I obviously hear some like Deftones stuff, and like just a lot of different elements of bands that incorporate a lot of different textures and sonics into what they do. That it would be, I feel like from your perspective, would just be a lot of fun to get in there and tinker and be like, all right, like let me just add this weird guitar delay things with swells, and then it creates this, and then that's just on a loop, and then now we can build from there or whatever. Like knowing that you kind of come from that space of what you filled in Case of Raw, kind of, that it's like I would like to see how you incorporate that into this.
Yeah. Moving forward for the full length, there's definitely we're always sending ideas back and forth. We're sending demos and stuff like that. So it definitely is pulling from all of our influences, and I'm very excited to see what we cook up. I feel like a kid in a playground. It's like it's all this stuff I love in bands, and there's no real like rules, so it's kind of cool to be in something that's mainstream enough where you can like just show it to someone and they can be into it, and they don't have to be part of a niche subculture or anything like that to like understand it and get it. But there's also so many elements that are able to like shine and come to the forefront that are a little more experimental, that are a little more out of the box. So yeah, I mean, I hear you.
Given the fact that this band has taken a while to kind of go through a gestation period to now be fully formed and ready to play and writing new music and so forth, how are you guys tackling, it seems like, the ever-changing landscape of how to roll out music? Like are you guys ones that you believe in kind of a full like project to be start to finish, whether it's an EP or a full length, or do you see more merit in kind of let's drop singles to kind of keep it fresh and you can kind of see where we're at literally in real time, maybe if a month or two beyond where our creation of this was? Do you kind of envision one or the other being the route you go, or just kind of playing around with whatever?
Yeah, I think we're likely going to take a more traditional approach. Just again, we want to be like how bands that we were into. Like we love that that kind of like old school mentality, getting excited for a record and stuff. And I know, and we are like fluid and dynamic with it. So if people want singles and they want something now or whatever, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But in terms of writing and our mentality and our approach, we want to have the idea there and done, and that way we know that we've gone over everything. We know that it's where we want it to be by the time it comes out. And even with the EP, it's like you want all of your songs to feel intentional, and you want the whole idea of what it is to be there. But I know other artists don't do that. Other guys, you drop a song here, drop a song there, and and that's great. And I have some of my favorite artists do that. But as of right now, I think we're probably going to take a more traditional approach.
I think it just gets interesting to kind of see how everyone's traversing it, because you look at, and this is sort of my own naivety on it, for a while I was like, why are we doing these like 7-month long rollouts for an EP or an album or whatever? Like by the time it comes out, I've heard 3/4 of it, and probably what weren't the singles probably weren't going to sway me to get it anyway, so did you really even need to put those out? But then as I kind of learned, and I think a great example of this, even despite how polarizing this person is, but you look at someone like Ronnie Radke and Falling in Reverse doing essentially like a 5-year rollout to an album by just releasing singles and putting a lot of time and effort into those individual singles, letting them kind of build up on the DSP. So when you're dropping this album, you've essentially got a double platinum.
Yeah, you got a hit record
right out of gate. And once I kind of learned that aspect of the DSPs and why the long rollouts exist currently, it made a lot more sense. But I kind of wonder, just given the fact that, like you said, pretty much anyone can record. You don't need to go to a studio. You don't really need labels necessarily for much more than potentially distribution and or advances for like tour recoups and stuff like that. But it just kind of becomes this thing where I just wonder, like, what is the landscape of people right now? Like, is it I don't really see why we're spending all this time to stack up and build and maybe next year put out a record where it's like, we already got 5-6 songs done. Let's just drop one every other month and kind of have that be the build up to something in a year from now or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, different things work for different artists. There's some artists that I do feel like that, like the long rollout won't work for. And then other artists, you can just kind of like drip drip stuff up until the full length, and people are excited and they're, so I think it just depends on the artist and your relationship with your fans. A Rising Empire, they've been great to us. They have a really I think they've had great calls in their vision of how to roll things out and how they want it to like be released. So, the whole team behind everything with The Dark has just been really, really like amazing. And I've learned so much myself as to how all this stuff works and everything. So yeah, I mean, I think it just depends on the artist, and I don't think there's a right or wrong way anymore. I do think that's like like I was saying before, the beauty of the internet and just being able to throw stuff out and whatever. Like the beauty is you find what works and what doesn't for you, and not everything has to be so so binary like it used to be in the past, where it was this way works, this way doesn't. You always release this day, never release this day. It's kind of just a little more fluid and cool. Like it's exciting for me. Like I think it's really, really a unique thing that we're experiencing now, and as artists and listeners. So it's all really exciting for me.
What has been one of your biggest? Damn, I had it like right there. What has been kind of one of your biggest like lessons learned kind of in being with this project that you've kind of maybe it's something that you've learned and put into your own life, but I was going to say, like, what is something you've learned from doing this that you've been really surprised by that has taught you something that you hadn't in all the years of doing what you've done?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely what I was saying before with like just kind of opening yourself up to an opportunity and not like thinking so hard about it. Like, because for me, I was like, oh, do I really want to go back to playing like heavy music? And like, then I know I love listening to that and I love playing those shows. But for me, it wasn't always the most fruitful. So I was like, go with my gut, learning really to trust my intuition and trust my gut. It knows more than I was giving it credit for. And I can think about every little thing that could go wrong and all that stuff as much as I want and do what I can to prevent all that stuff. But at the end of the day, your gut and your intuition it has your best interest in mind always. So just being able to follow what I'm feeling, as opposed to like being super analytical and, this could go wrong, and is weighing your pros versus your cons. Like just being like, all right, this is cool. This feels good. The songs are dope. Like the show is going to be sick. Like just don't do it and have fun and do it. It could go wrong. And if that happens, then you figure it out and you put that fire out, or you deal with it when it's there. But worrying about things in the future or these like potential outcomes is a waste of energy. And it's a vampire for your own happiness and things that you enjoy doing. It takes the fun out of something awesome, like playing music. Like it shouldn't feel bad,
So I would assume with one of the guys in the band being in another band, that's probably the more full-time commitment for that person. How does that make you approach, the rest of your career at this point? Because you're in an area where I would assume opportunities are kind of popping up, but it's how far in advance are you already booked out? Because I always think that's kind of an interesting thing talking to different people is like, like talking to some of my friends are like, yeah, I know the record's not out. We already know the record will be out like in, the third quarter of this year. We're already booked and we know what we're doing for the next 3 years. You all will figure that out as we kind of reveal it. But, are you kind of in that boat too, where your year is kind of booked up, or this is what you're doing now, and when the time is done with this, kind of figure things out at that point? Or how are you kind of navigating that?
Yeah, I mean, we always play it by ear. We're also like pretty careful about opportunities that we take and don't take. Like again, everything up to this point has been so intentional that we're very much like intentional with how we're going to present ourselves, where we're going to be, and all that stuff. So, and who we're playing with. So, it hasn't been an issue yet. I mean, it's been like, I feel like in the modern landscape, like everybody's playing for everyone now. So it's like, we got it down to a science how to like book around everything and all that stuff. So it hasn't been an issue yet.
I was going to say, looking at Keith Wallen from Breaking Ben, like he was on the podcast a while ago, and now just seeing how he's traversing his solo career while doing the Breaking Ben thing, where you're like, oh, you're out with 10 years, and then you're hopping on this thing for like 3 dates, and then you're doing a couple of headliners, and then Breaking Ben toured, and then you're opening part of the Breaking Ben tour, but then you're not. And then it's just like, it's crazy to see it because you like look at it, or even like Maddie from Memphis Mayfire and Amber Lynn, where you're like looking at his schedule and you're like, how the fuck are you not getting like so overwhelmed by just the enormity of it all, of just like, I'm never going to be home. I'm just grinding at all times. And at some point you're like, I know this is when I have to kind of like, this is something I'm passionate about and it's something I want to do. But at what point does it almost become like you're taking on too much and possibly going to just burn yourself into the ground, where one of the things you're going to look at and go like, I fucking hate this thing now. Cause like all I see is the struggle and like the things I don't get to do in it, that I just like see someone like yourself where I'm like, does that sort of seeing a schedule just get filled up? Like, does that make you be like, oh my God, that's so awesome. Like proud of myself for like doing this and getting it. Or do you look at it? Cause I feel like this is where I'd be, where I'm like, oh my God, what did I just get myself into?
Depends on the day, man. It depends on the day. Depends on the day, man. You know, I do think that, you know, this lifestyle and this line of work isn't for everyone, for sure.
No,
some of my closest friends that play in bands, they end up getting out of the lifestyle and all that stuff because it really is not for everyone. It's a lot of sacrifice, a lot of time away from your friends and family. And, you know, I think an important distinction for any musician, you know, if anybody, I remember when I first started, you know, touring, like you playing with local bands and stuff. And, you know, some of the younger guys will ask you like, oh, do you have any advice? Like, I want to get out of my like local area and I want to start playing other places, all that stuff. I would say the most important thing is to just know if, you know, is this what you want to do forever or is this a hobby? Because if it's a hobby, keep it that, man. Just love it. Love playing with your friends. Love getting stoned and playing songs and stuff. Like, that's awesome. And that's great. But if you do like want to take it to like the next level where very realistically you could be away from home for 8 to 10 months out of the year, not see your friend, not see your girlfriend, not see your boyfriend, like see your family, it's a real possibility. Like if you get to a point, you take it far enough. So just know, because it's going to be a sacrifice and it's going to be a labor of love. Like I have no regrets. I have no regrets. Is it hard? Yeah, it can be. It can be very hard times, but you know, there's something fulfilling about it, and it's not all fun and games. If it's fun and games for you, keep it that way. It's all like it really is. It's special, like it for sure. But for me, it's not really fun and games anymore. It's more of fulfilling. It feels like I'm doing my purpose, and when I'm not doing that, I definitely feel a gap. And for me, I'm like, that's how I know I'm in the right place. And even if it does feel overwhelming, I do feel that it's justified. But yeah, being tapped into that and how you're feeling about it, I think is a super important clarification, and just being honest with yourself and also trying to enjoy. Like, I do think a lot of this is perspective. If you're focused on all the bad stuff, it is going to suck. You're going to hate it. But if you're like, it's going to suck. But if you're like, oh, this is cool, I'm in a different city every day playing music for people, like, yeah, then it's going to be awesome. So that is your own responsibility to like make sure you keep your mental in check, you know?
I think it's a little bit harder at times to do that, because something I've been thinking a lot about is how I think we're sort of conditioned to just keep your head down, keep moving, and you don't ever really take the time to pick your head up and just kind of admire like the journey you're on and where it's taken you. I mean, it was kind of funny. You were just saying like getting high and just like jamming with people. It's like, I, for the longest time, was so into like sports and shit and playing sports that it was like, oh, drugs, smoking, bad. Now it's like, but like all I had were people that were into sports and athletics and stuff. I didn't have people who were into music. And then when I got out of high school, all I had were people who were creatives and into a lot of creative things, but hated sports. Yeah. So it was like I traded one for the other, and I exist in both worlds, but neither really ever thinks I belong to a degree in either one. But it gets interesting when you kind of start part and parceling your life and kind of thinking about how, like I said, we're just so conditioned to be like, okay, keep your head down, do the work, and just grind, that you never really stop to think about like, oh, shit, wow. Yeah. I can't believe like this like hobby, this dumb thing I decided to pursue for some reason has brought me here. And, you know, I've had a few of those moments doing this show, you know, famously, like I got to see Foo Fighters, thankfully, before Taylor had passed away. And I got to go to Sonic Temple as media. And it was like the first festival I ever got to cover. And it was like a thing where it's like I never got to see Foo Fighters, always wanted to. and like a dude that the guy who recorded Sera, recorded your last record. So I'm not mentioning names, but everyone who knows. I had asked that person to do my show when I had first started it, and I wanted to talk to him about a few different things, recording music, putting on festivals himself, and so forth. And I got what's your reach? What kind of numbers? And this is like months after I started the show, and I'm like, dude, fuck you.
Yeah, come on.
It was a thing where that was sort of the catalyst for me to just keep doing shit. And I remember posting, like, Bridget took a photo of me wearing a Foo Fighters hoodie I just bought, looking, because I went all over the fucking stadium to see this band with my pass. And I'm at the back of the stadium and watching with this hoodie, and she took a photo. And it was like a thing where I was like, that was the moment. That was the pick your head up moment for a second, and just kind of enjoying the work you put into this thing. And like, look where you fucking are, dude. And it was like, one person told you no, and that was sort of the catalyst to light the fire under your ass to get you here.
Yeah.
And I remember like a few people who know that story were like, are you big enough now? And I was like, no, but I'm big enough to be here for some reason.
Yeah.
And there's no real explanation necessarily other than just the hard work and dedication you put into it and the sacrifices. But I think having the wherewithal to know that you need those moments too, to kind of keep driving you and keep it in perspective, I think is huge. And I don't know if that's something that just comes with age or being able to kind of step outside of yourself. And that's a big thing for me with, psychedelics and stuff, where it's like, it's been one of the few things that puts me in the current, what I'm dealing with right now, because that's why I had to go to therapy. Because I was, like you were saying, I would think of all the shit that could go wrong, try to solve for those. And it's like, but that doesn't happen. So I just wasted all that time and energy for nothing. When I could have put it towards something that was more valuable for my energy. And so to hear you say that, it's like, I think it's such a profound thing that I wish more people would understand. And I don't know if it's just for lack of people like us not saying to do those things or to partake in those, but I think it's such a huge and profound thing to have that ability to be present and understand what it takes to get where you are.
Yeah, that's why I like to say it whenever I can, because I know a lot of people are on their own journey, whatever you're doing, if you're pursuing the art, you're pursuing anything with a high margin for failure, you are always going to feel the pressure of not doing enough. You're always going to feel the pressure of I'm not where I'm at. And it was a really important lesson for me, when even with the old band and stuff, like, you're always thinking of the next thing that you don't have. And it's like, you know what I mean? And you'll get it. And there's no moment of like, damn, I accomplished that. It's just like, now I got to do this. Like, you're like, oh, I want that. And so you're always just chasing the next shiny thing. And I do believe that it comes from a good place. You do need to have the drive to pursue that relentlessly, but at the same time, you are not going to enjoy the journey. And it's always going to be a journey, because there is no end point where you're like, oh, I made it. I did this. Like, unless you stop and be like, I'm on stage with Foo Fighters. Like, I got this picture. Like, I can see it now. Like, and if that moment could have came and went, if you were thinking about, I got to get on stage with Taylor Swift now or something, like, if you're always chasing it, like, you need to have that appreciation for your own, like, dedication and your own sacrifice and your own, like, fearlessness for, obviously a million people are going to tell you no, because they want what's best for you. They want you to be okay. And they do know that if things go wrong, you're going to be screwed. But those people that are like, that see the process happening and they can zoom out and see, like, oh, this is cooking up. Like, this is something happening here. Stick with it, trust yourself, and like, trust that your own process and all that stuff, and go for it hard. Even if you fail, you might fail. It's real. Like, I won't tell you if you believe in yourself and try hard enough that everything will happen, because it might not. But there's nothing wrong with failure. There is something wrong with not doing your best and applying, your passion and your intuition and investing in yourself. There is something wrong with not trying, I will say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good place to start wrapping this up, because I always like to end on a thing where you're like, and boom, there's like the little bit of wisdom. If you stayed around for like an hour, like, hopefully there's at least one of those like aha moments in every episode. But obviously the dark, you got, like I said, EP's coming out in about, was it March something? I forget the date already.
EP's coming out on February 21st.
February 21st, never mind.
Yeah.
And then you got the show, and then I would assume there's probably potentially some touring probably down the line for the EP. And then what else? I mean, at one point there was a solo thing you were working on years ago that I don't know if you're still working on. That's on the back shelf now.
Yeah, it's on the back shelf. I mean, I'm always writing. I'm always doing something, and I like to like keep my stuff, like let it end up wherever it ends up. I might do a little something here or there. We don't know. Right now, my intention's on the dark for sure.
Well, is there anything you would like to plug online, or anything at all that you would like to have people know about that we didn't cover?
No, I mean, just check out the Dark. You know, it's at the Dark FM on Instagram. Our website's there. Yeah, just check it out. Be a part of it, man. It's really exciting and really, you know, there's a lot of love into it. Even if it's not your thing, you can still, you know, check it out, show a friend, whatever's clever. Like, but it's really something cool, and I'm really proud of it. So if you, yeah, I would just say go check it out.
Do you guys have names yet for your fans? I feel like there's got to be like a fan club thing that's coming or something.
Not yet. The fans got to name themselves.
Okay.
See what do you guys want?
There you go. Leave a comment on the Dark Instagram page with what you want to be called. But then where can people find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at _NSERA. You know, a little homage, but _NSERA. Yeah, that's how you find all this stuff.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It was fun doing this. I was gonna like come in right out the gate and be like swish, but I was like, I don't even know if you still do that anymore.
Dude, I would have cracked up.
That's like the other real funny quick story. So we had some people over for brunch a couple of weeks ago, and I made my biscuits and gravy, and someone was like, one of our friends was like, do you make good biscuits and gravy? And I was like, there was a guy that was on tour that stayed with us for a long weekend, and I made biscuits and gravy for all them, and he just was like, yo, these shits is fire. And he goes, okay. And he goes, so are they good? I was like, I'll let you determine. But like, they were from Rhode Island, and they all enjoyed my biscuits and gravy. So I think you know, I know back home, like we still go to some greasy spoon diners, and I mean, I'm not gonna get Scrapple or any of that shit, but it's like, you know, there's certain staples that it's like growing up out that way, you eat these things, and biscuits and gravy, man. If you don't eat that, or if you fuck it up, you suck. Your culinary skills are called into question. Like I can't trust you.
I can't trust you. You don't fuck biscuits and gravy.
Yeah. So I actually was telling that story a couple weeks ago, and then my friend was like, "These are actually really good biscuits and gravy." I was like, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for taking the time, and looking forward to hopefully catching a show if you guys make it out to Michigan or somewhere nearby. I feel like this is going to be more of a Detroit and or Chicago kind of a band.
You'll come hang.
I know.
I'll get you to come hang.
Yeah, all right. I'll be wearing the Swish shirt.
Yeah, dude. Bring me one of those hoodies if you have any extra.
I might actually.
Oh yeah, it's my boy.
There you go. Thanks so again, and enjoy the rest of your day, man.
Thanks, you too, brother.